They only recorded 5 albums over a period of 6 years, but they became the best known and well-loved duo in rock history. But like so many acts, with that fame came tension and the inevitable breakup. Now they have regrouped a few times and then they fall apart again. They helped define the late 60s sound, and in my mind, they will always belong in the Sounds of Silence. Yep, let's take a look at Simon and Garfunkel. Let's drop the needle. Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel met and became friends in the 4th grade. In 1956, they wrote their first song together. And when they were 15, they recorded their first song, Hey Schoolgirl, calling themselves Tom and Jerry. They even appeared on American Bandstand. And they were still teenagers. But their music career stalled. In 1963, they had finished college and got back together and called themselves Kane and Gar. And they went down to Greenwich Village and got absorbed into the folk scene down there. And they were actually playing at a coffee house where they debuted a song that they had written called The Sound of Silence. And in the audience was a record producer named Tom Wilson, who was a big producer at Columbia Records at the time. Well, he liked what he heard, so he signed them. And they recorded their first album called Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. under their real names, Simon and Garfunkel. The album had a number of songs written by Paul Simon, some traditional folk songs and some covers. I like Simon's Beaker Street, Sparrow, He Was My Brother, the title track Wednesday Morning 3 a.m., and the original folk version of Sounds of Silence. They also cover Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changing. But the album doesn't catch fire, and Garfunkel goes back to college. Simon, meanwhile, goes to England. And while he's in England, he records his first solo album, the Paul Simon Songbook. I really like this album. You should check it out. But while he's in England, something interesting is happening in the States. College radio stations are picking up the Sound of Silence and playing it. And Tom Wilson goes, I think we could make a hit single out of this song. So he goes into the studio with studio musicians and records a new version of Sound of Silence that is a rock version of the song, which is the version that most of us grew up listening to. It did become a huge hit. Now, the only problem was Tom Wilson never told Simon and Garfunkel what he was doing. And when Paul Simon heard the song on the radio, he was livid. But he couldn't argue with its success. But Columbia wanted to strike while the iron was hot. So Simon and Garfunkel went back into the studio and recorded an album, which of course is called The Sounds of Silence. Now, to expedite the recording process, they actually lifted a number of tracks from Paul's solo album in the UK, the Paul Simon Songbook, and put it on this record. Check out the electrified hit, The Sounds of Silence. Compare it with the folk version. I also like Leaves That Are Green, Kathy's Song, April Comes She Will, and the other hit, I Am a Rock. Buoyed by the success, when it comes time to record their third album, Paul Simon decides he's taking complete artistic control. And so he does. And to support the album, which is called Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme, Simon and Garfunkel tour colleges extensively. And this album is actually my favorite Simon and Garfunkel album. I like the Great Scarborough Fair Canticle. This one gives me goosebumps even today. Homeward Bound, the 59th Street Bridge song, Feelin' Groovy. And the album hit number 16 on the charts. But then Simon develops a writer's block, and they don't record any new material until 1967, and Columbia is panicking. Around this time, Mike Nichols is making a movie called The Graduate. He really likes Simon and Garfunkel music, and he wants to use it in his movie. And Columbia sees an opportunity, thinking, we can put out a soundtrack album to fill the void where we don't have that much new material for a real album from Paul Simon. Paul Simon was resistant to writing new material for the movie, but in the end he decided he'd write 3 new songs, which he submitted to Mike Nichols. Nichols turned 2 of them down, but the one he picked was an unfinished song, which was called Mrs. Robinson. In the summer of 1967, Simon and Garfunkel helped organize the Monterey Pop Festival, and they even appeared at it. Their 4th album is finally released in 1968, and it's called Bookends, and it's a concept album. Well, at least side 1 is a concept album. It takes a look at life from early childhood up through old age. But the concept only lasted for the first side. I like the Bookends themes, Save the Life of My Child, the phenomenal America, my favorite song of theirs, Overs, Voices of Old People, Old Friends, and a reprise of Bookends' theme. Now, Simon didn't have enough material to continue the concept onto side 2. So side 2 has a bunch of other songs that had been released as singles put together on this record. And they include Fakin' It, Mrs. Robinson, A Hazy Shade of Winter, and At the Zoo. The album is a huge success, and it hits #1 on the charts. Capitalizing on this success, Paul Simon decides he'll stretch his wings and do a whole number of things. Write music for films, work with Leonard Bernstein on doing a religious mass musical, do Broadway shows. Now, none of these actually panned out. And in the meantime, Garfunkel got back together with Mike Nichols and went and shot the film Catch-22. Finally back in the studio, the duo record their final studio album. And it's released in 1968, and it's A Bridge Over Troubled Water. And to say that this was a monumental hit record is an understatement. It was the best-selling album in 1970, 1971, and 1972. Obviously, there's some great songs on this record. There's the title track. But I also like El Condorpasa, If I Could, Cecilia, The Boxer, Baby Driver, and The Only Living Boy in New York. But the recording process on this record was quite difficult. The relationship between Paul and Artie had deteriorated to the point where they really couldn't stand each other. And Paul Simon decided he wanted out of the duo. Columbia tried to talk him out of it, saying, whatever you do in the future, you'll never be as successful as you are with Simon and Garfunkel. Boy, were they wrong. They both went on to solo careers, but by 1980, they were both kind of struggling. And then a local promoter came to them with an idea that they could do a concert, do a reunion concert in Central Park and make it a free concert. They agreed to it, and it attracted 500,000 people. There was a live album that came out of it, and HBO even filmed it. They had so much fun doing that reunion concert that they decided they would go on a tour together. But as soon as that started, the tensions came up again, and the tour was cut short. They tried to reunite a few times after that, but it never quite worked. And just a few short years ago, Paul Simon decided and announced that he was done with touring. And my wife and I actually went to one of his final shows, and I talked about that in a previous episode, which is called Still Crazy. And here's the link to that. So if you haven't seen that, it goes into Paul Simon's solo career. You might want to check it out. With the incredible songwriting of Paul Simon and the angelic voice of Art Garfunkel, they were worldwide phenomena, and they helped define the sound of the 60s. Thanks for watching, and always embrace the sound of silence, and keep a rockin'. If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.